We have Tala with us for a little bit. I just wanted to have a quick chat with her, and if you have some questions, we'll do that. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for coming and for staying for the film. This is Tala Hadid, the director of the documentary you just saw. The first thing, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, I just want to say thank you all for coming today. And thank you for inviting me and for the Middle East Institute and the Magic Lantern series.
The Magic Lantern, Stephen is here, another Magic Lantern person.
The Watson Institute, and I'm very happy to be back at Brown. I haven't been here for too long to count since my graduation, which is a long time ago. But thank you. And as for the hiccup at the end, normally I'd be tortured like to see that on the last shot, but we're also used to streaming. And unfortunately, like I was telling Adele earlier, we shouldn't have digital prints. They should be on. They're actually strangely better on film, that they last longer, and that if there was a 35 millimeter whatever going, it wouldn't have happened unless the whole thing broke. But
well, I was mortified. So
fine, don't worry. I think we're all used to like streaming and whatever.
So one thing I wanted to ask you, and maybe to share with the folks. You spent a lot of time making this film, and I think the way that you made it, the way that you approached this community, this family, these sisters, is really part of what the film looks like in the end. So can you just maybe talk a little bit about that, and like how you found this community, how you found these sisters, this family, what interested you in filming them, and how long it took to do that?
Well, I'd been actually traveling in the south of Morocco many, many years before, I think when I was a teenager, and I'd passed through this valley for one night, and I was with a group of friends, very impressed by the landscape, the mountains, like you're eaten up, you have to sort of submit in front of this massive, vast landscape. And that was the first time I hardly met anyone in the village. I met maybe one or two people. It was one night and one morning. Then I was like, I've got to come back. And then I came back another time. And the second time I came back was maybe literally 10 years later. And the government was building a road. So it took about 8 hours to drive there from Marrakesh. And they were mining, they were like blowing up the mountain to lay down the asphalt. And so I arrived and I stayed much longer. And I thought, wow, what's going to happen when the road comes? And I met a lot more people, and people were very gracious, invited me in.
And just so there was no idea of a film at that point.
Well, this is this is what I'm saying. So I thought, oh God, maybe I come back and do something. I had no idea, like before the road changes everything. The road actually was abandoned because it's very difficult to get to. And anyway, that's another story. But I thought I'll come back, and it took me another many years. And then I was like, I'm ready. So I packed my equipment and I came back to the village. There are a string of villages in this valley. And I didn't know much about life here. So I didn't come with a sort of idea of what I was going to film. And then I began slowly to meet people, and I met, by chance, Tleitmes, the mother, and the older sister, and then Khadija, the younger sister. And they invited me in for tea, and then I stayed with them. And then I think I made multiple trips back and forth with an idea of filming, again, still being a stranger in this place. The whole filming process took about 7 years of filming, where I'd come back and forth and then sometimes live there for 3-4 months, sometimes for 1 month. I would come and go and lived with this family. But then got to know everyone in the village and then some other neighboring villages. And so I was a guest. And, when you're a guest in somebody's house, you have to learn the rules. It's the same. I didn't come with an idea of what I was going to film. I just thought I'd learn about this community. And if this project takes 20 years, it'll take 20 years. I didn't have a limit. I got a small grant. So I thought, okay, well, let's see where this takes me. And so as I was learning about this family and this community, I began to construct this film. I mean, I told them I'm here to do a chronicle of your life here, and then obviously of your lives. But I didn't know where it was going to go.
When we were talking earlier on, there's something that really struck me with the film. I was thinking that it's not a naturalistic film, right? It's not something where you just put the camera and you disappear and we just see them and follow them. It's like the camera is very present. The camera is in front of them. So it's two things. It's like the way you create this intimacy, so the camera can be so close, so you can be so close. I mean, you're in bed with these girls, and all of that. And at the same time, what is the camera doing by being so present in the film and in the way it's sort of interacting with these people?
Well, as I was saying, when you're staying with people, not just in the house with the family, but also with the community, that you're a guest in this place. Like, you really are the stranger. And to a certain extent, I came with the camera. I didn't start filming immediately. The camera was there in a bag in the house. And then it took a few weeks and I brought the camera out and started taking photographs. I didn't film immediately. And so the camera was also a guest. And, it's this machine that this particular family got used to, and that the children, the two sisters and the brothers would play with it sometimes. And so it was I always thought that the camera was there and it became something that was familiar to everybody. And then once I started filming, then there's always this sort of relationship between the people in front of the lens, you, and then the technician, and then the camera as this conduit, of which they became very accustomed to. And obviously I got to know them more. But the camera was in the kitchen, the bedroom, sitting around, and so, it was there. And to a certain extent in the wider, much later, like the wedding scene, this relationship to people being filmed, the proximity of the camera and myself, reached a sort of apotheosis, because then it's like the group and the community. And, if you'll notice, in the wedding scene, I'm also very close to people. Mm-hmm. And most of these people didn't know who I was, because all the villagers congregate for weddings. So many people come further down the valleys to come to the weddings. So it's the first time they saw me, and it's the first time I appeared in front of the village, everybody together, to film this ritual. But yeah, so there's this, it was also time, the luxury of having, time for people to be used to me and to the camera.
There's something so as we were talking about the film that you mentioned that I thought was interesting. You said many people ask you, and maybe you've noticed this in the film, what is real and what is staged, right? Like you said, that's a question that comes often, and that you sort of respond in a completely different way. Again, with this idea of the camera, you were talking about the performance of these people, of these characters. And when I watched the film a few times, I thought that the word that came to my mind, or the expression, was that you were treating them like cinematic characters. And then you said, no, it's not exactly that. It's something different. So then I said, okay, so maybe you're giving them a space to exist in the frame. How did you work with them? What were you thinking about in terms of how you're going to render these people on screen, basically? How did you approach that?
Well, to be honest, I don't really think about how I'm going to render them on screen. So I did tell them from the beginning, I'm here to do a portrait of you, of your community and of you. And I did tell them that you are participatory in this portrait of yourselves. Like, I want you to take part in it. I mean, that was slow. It wasn't like I'm here to do it and you're going to participate. But I mean, slowly I was like, here's the camera. But before I even got into the technical aspects of, like, which I'll get into in a second, I told them that you are part of this portrait. It's not just me. I'm the stranger here, not just in your lives, but in this community. So they were my guides also, meaning that the people that I would photograph, not just the sisters, but even anybody else who appeared in the film, except from the children, I was like, you show me what it's like here, and I'm not going to learn this in a week or two. So this idea of the participation then became concrete after 2 or 3 years where I gave the microphone. You'll maybe see in the credits that Khadija, the younger sister, is credited with the sound because I gave her a microphone. And I asked her that this would be her chance to capture what she loved or didn't like about her place, the place that she was born in. And so she recorded for me many things. Most of the songs, the singing that you hear, was her and her friends, or the river, or sounds of nature. And the end part, where just before the wedding I asked her, your sister's about to get married, like, what could you say to her? I imagined in a letter, but she would never have written a letter to her sister. But like, what would you want to say to your sister? And she went away to record. Do you see? So by this point, they had taken on the responsibility of being part of their portrait.
And they had a sense for you of like what
I think so.
But it's not exactly playing a role, right?
No, they were not playing roles because you can't. They're in their real life. But for example, there's only one scene in the film that's, I don't want to say fictional because there's always performance in front of a camera, even in real life. But let's say the scene where there really was reconstruction was the scene when they're in bed and they speak about the dream, and there's a shot, counter shot. I mean, you can see that. But actually, I was sharing a room with them, and I'd woken up one morning and they had told each other exactly the same thing. I dreamt of you, and you were by the almond trees, and I was too tired to get my camera out. And then afterwards, I was like, oh, maybe we can film the dream sequence. And then I let them take charge. Like, they chose the place because it was her dream. They chose what they were going to wear. We filmed the dream where she's running and calling to her sister. And then I thought, well, how am I going to put this in the film because it's a kind of fictional thing? And I was like, the only way is for them to redo the waking up. So I said, do you think you can read? And they're children, so play comes easy. And so that whole scene of I Dreamt of You was a reconstruction with them directing. And basically, I was just the cinematographer. That is the obvious. Then there are the sequences where, again, because of the presence of the camera, there's always performance. And
like the two friends,
for example, with the cameras on a tripod, and they were playing hooky, and I was with them, and they should have been in school. And I asked them, maybe you can talk about school, maybe you can. And I don't speak Tala Hadid, which is Tamazigh, like Amazigh language, 1 or 2 words. But I said, maybe you can talk about school, maybe you can talk about something else. And they ended up talking about school and about, which didn't come into the film, fascinating, about water rights. But the camera's there on this tripod, and there's a sort of frontal performance. And it's real because they're not, they're really talking about the school play they're in, and they're laughing, but they know that there's the camera. And in fact, at the end of that scene, Khadija's friend looks at the camera and smiles, and the cut, that's it. And then I think Khadija says, Safi, basta, like that's enough. And for them, the scene ended. So there was this thing where they're talking to each other, and it's all real, but there's obviously performance because of my presence and the camera's presence. And it was fascinating being behind the camera and watching this, because I always thought about this as sort of eruptions of fiction in the real. And then the ultimate performance is of course the rite of the wedding, where this relationship that I could only understand or intimate later in the editing in the film comes to its utter fullness in the wedding, where the ultimate performance, the ultimate rite, with the group and the collective. And that was the same thing, and the same similar kind of performance that you see with the two friends, but large, with the collective, where the camera's there, and obviously they're in the middle of the rite, but the camera and myself became literally part of the ritual, which was very strange.
Was there an excitement for them at some point that when you were there with the camera?
No, it was the ritual had started.
Okay.
They couldn't care less whether I was filming or not, but and I think you can see it maybe, that even strangers are recognizing the camera. And in some moments, at least that I recognize, I think, where they're sort of extra performative, where even when the old man is singing, there's a moment where he looks at the camera, and it's just at the very last moment he does almost like a physical gesture, which is to the camera. And I wasn't even meant to be in it because it was the men's space.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, without the camera, you wouldn't have been in that space, right? Like,
no, I shouldn't have been in that space.
Right.
I begged to be in that space because it was the men's space. So I asked the father, like, please let me in. And so it was this awkward, they were like, okay, fine. And so they let me into the men's, you know, ritual song, the night, you know, where they were singing. And I was there with the camera and I just plunged in. I mean, I didn't know most of those men, including the elderly man. But, you know, since I stumbled on into the middle of the ritual, it was already gone. Do you see? Like I became, or the camera became part of the rite. And so it's not like, oh yeah, she's filming and here we are. It was very strange. I became part of the ritual, and as did the camera. And, you know, it was a very, you know, incredible thing as a filmmaker to sort of participate in.
There's just maybe one or two things I want to ask, but before, does anybody have any question, want to ask anything? Yes?
I've got a question. Thanks for the film and for visiting Brown. It's a treat to be able to see things on a bigger screen in the company of other people after the last couple of years, even if they're streamed and not on film. But I was curious sort of how or if you maintained a connection with a village and these sisters after you were done shooting the film. And I mean, Khadijah's really a kind of, I mean, she comes across as a very strong character and personality. And I was kind of curious where, I mean, it was some years now, I think, between this film and now, where she ended up or what her path ended up looking like.
Yeah, of course, because the filming was just a little moment of their teenage and their childhood. And, you know, I don't think, you know, so many years with them, like, I was just texting with Khadija and spoke to her like 3 days ago. She's very strong character, very smart. They're mothers. And life goes on. You know, life goes on. She didn't become a judge or a lawyer, unfortunately, for many reasons.
They've seen the film, right?
Of course.
How did they react?
They saw the film before anybody saw the film. Like if they wouldn't have wanted. Okay. No, I screened it at different times because they were not together. I mean, they were. I think Fatima saw it first. Khadija was away in Agadir, so her and her parents saw it, and then some other people in the village, and then Khadija wasn't there, and then I came back and she saw it.
And what was the reaction? I mean, to Kate's also point, like, how did they react
to the film? At the time, Khadija laughed throughout watching. Like, she just laughed, like, and fascinated by her image. And Fatima had a baby, and I think had the same anxiety in her, that which is resolved now, of her, not just her marriage, but wanting to not be in the village, wanting to go to Casablanca, wanting to go to the town. So when she saw the film, she had a more melancholy reaction. I can't explain it. I think because it reflected back that question in her.
The time before the wedding, the marriage.
No, not the marriage. Just the unknown. And I think because, you know, a film or an image always brings it back to you. I mean, you know, you see yourself. And so she was still in that predicament. Now she's out of that. I mean, she's better in a different, I mean, she's not in, because she's in Marrakesh, near Marrakesh. So she's sort of in the town and with her husband. But when she saw the film, she wasn't. And so I think that she was still in that, where she is in the film. And she was holding her baby, and, you know, it was very intense. I don't know how she felt watching it, to be honest. Because it's not the same, you know, like, oh, what do you think? I couldn't ask her, but I could sense and I could see that she was melancholy. In the sense that the film showed, at the time that she watched it herself, exactly in the moment that she was in. they need to see it again. I mean, maybe they have copies. I don't know. It'll be different for her. But I'm happy that she's out of that state, but still. But difficult.
We have to leave soon this space. Any other question, guys? Yeah, please. Okay.
My name's Aisha. I'm from the Atlas Mountains.
Oh.
I'm from near Dunet, so
Cool.
probably
Beautiful.
north
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
where you were. And I also would have said this to you in Tashkent, but then you said you don't understand it. I just want to thank you. Like it means a lot to have something like this shared. Thanking both of you really.
No, thank you.
Really thanking you for this piece of cinema that just like has really touched my heart and feels really close to home.
Well, that means so much. Did you? Well, I know. I have to say, I had a screening in not near Tiznit. My God, I've like blanked. Anyway, a totally different region, and it was one of the most amazing screenings I've had. Better than Berlin. Well, you know, for a filmmaker, big festival was great. But it was a screening for teenagers and some of their parents, farmers in a very, very different area, but close enough, near Agadir. And wow, you know what? People were singing along. I didn't know that they knew the songs. They knew the songs, and this is, again, a different region. And I went with a friend who was like, I had the screening, but I had a friend of mine there who's a social worker. And in the beginning, you know, I'm used to sort of hushed, you know, screenings where everyone's quiet and watches the film. But in this screening, people were like, they were also talking. There were like 300 people. They were talking. And I was like, I said to my friend, my God, they hate the film. I had like a totally like bourgeois reaction of like, my film, they hate it. And he was like, calm down. Wait. So I was like, okay. And suddenly there were moments where people, the way I saw it, I'd like to think that it was like an image back to a community, which is usually ever represented on TV in 2-minute reportages of the farmer in the mountain. And it's also a portrait that most Moroccans would really recognize because it's an agricultural country, agrarian country, and so most Moroccans, even in the countryside, have very profound ties to the countryside. And so it's one of the many portraits of Morocco, but I think that most Moroccans or North Africans would recognize. But anyway, in this screening, these kids suddenly began singing to these songs. I didn't realize that they knew some of them, like really singing along. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. It's because the portrait is thrown back. And I hope that makes me very happy to hear that it moved you. Yes, this is it.
I can't thank you enough.
Well, it was like a profound, you know, I'm Moroccan, my mother's Moroccan, and you know, I really felt like you know, I really understood the country. A bit apart from, I've traveled all over Morocco, but really spending time in the mountains in the Atlas, this region, and making this film, I really understood the roots of so many things in Moroccan culture. And it's not just in the sense of, you know, sort of agrarian, remote communities, but the rituals that are, you know, pagan in their source, and so many things about Morocco. And so it was really very humbling for me, as a Moroccan, to learn that.
I had very fancy questions about time and space, but I don't want to continue after that.
Well, we were talking earlier about Deleuze, but anyway, that's another story.
More questions if you want.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Dita.
Oh.
And thank you for the beautiful movie. And I had a question that's kind of connected to what you were talking about right now, about audience. So like, I saw that the film came out in 2017, and I was just wondering, like, where you showed the movie. I know you mentioned a little bit about that, but like, whether it was screened in Morocco or not, and like what kind of. Okay.
Yeah, it was screened in Casablanca, Rabat. I could do it like all over, Morocco, and then it's come out in Japan, like in cinemas in Japan, and I mean all over the place. But yeah, screened in Morocco, in festivals and in educational settings and Cinémathèque. I didn't, at the time, there was a TV offer, but Khadija hadn't been married yet. And they didn't understand. They were like, what do you mean? Because I was like, she's not married yet. I don't want the film to be on like prime time until she gets married. And they didn't understand what I was saying. You know, they were like, you're crazy.
Which is an interesting consideration, right?
Well, I was like, because they come first. And I mean, we come back to this thing of being in their community. And initially, I mean, I'll just tell a story. It got into Berlin, which is, you know, a big festival and important. And so I went there and I was like, you know, does Khadija want to come with me? Fatima was already married. So and Khadija, basically, her father, you know, he took her out of school at 14. And, you know, and it's not because nobody could help them with the farm work. And I was like, please don't do this. Like, I'll help. She can come. If she goes to university, she can live with me. I live in Marrakesh. And they didn't want, you know, they didn't want to. And I respect that, you know, fine. Meaning I'm not there to like fight with the parents or the community. So I went back and I was like, Berlin, does she want to come? And so her father was like, all right, let me think about it. I'll tell you in the morning. And she really wanted to come. Then he says to me, yes, she can go with you to Berlin, but she can't be out of your sight. I mean, it's a big responsibility. And then I thought, you know what, why is she going to come to Berlin? This is going to maybe sound, I had this discussion in a festival somewhere, but I can't remember where it was, in Europe. And somebody had asked me, did they go to Berlin, like the big screening, the parties? And I was like, and I told the story and I was like, you know what? I decided, no, she shouldn't come. Because it's not because she wouldn't be protected there, but she is already on this path, meaning she will have to get married. She's going to come back to the community. This film changed their lives because they were part of it and they made it with me. But I'm not, and it comes to the greater, maybe deeper story, what you were asking me, question about coming with a narrative to impose on a community, is that if I was and there are many great feminists in Morocco who are doing work for education to reach remote communities, but I'm a filmmaker, meaning I was there and I'm just a witness. Meaning that it's not my place to comment, even if the film is about women and education and the future. But I just parachuted into this community and I left. So yes, coming back, I'm still in touch with them. I hope that I'm a sort of older mother, sister figure. I'm involved in their lives. It's not just like, hello, like I'll see them when I go back. Maybe she'll come and stay with me for a few days, Khadija. But this community has its rules. And it's, you know, I'm, again, not an activist. It's not my place to come in and change it, even if I was there for like 7.5 years. Though I have some regrets because I wish she'd been a lawyer because she's so smart, or a judge, or whatever she wanted to do.
And very opinionated.
And it's not because she's a woman, by the way, because her brothers were also sent off very young to work in the north of Morocco, you know, as itinerant labourers, because the community comes first. I mean, you know, it's the collective first before the individual. And that's something that, being again a guest, that I learned at the end of my stay there. You know, that it really is, the collective is everything, and the community is everything.
Guys, thank you for coming. Thank you to Tala for chatting with us.